Hello and welcome to Rahul Verse. In today's video lecture, we are going to discuss India's free trade agreements. Why are we having this discussion? You all know that recently India and UK have finalized their FTA. We have already had a discussion on this. I hope you've seen the video. If you have not seen it, then do watch it to get a detailed understanding of India-UK FTA. In today's discussion, we are not going to talk about any individual FTA. We are going to have a generic discussion about India's free trade agreements. We are going to answer certain questions. For instance, free trade agreements, are they a recent phenomena or is it a policy right from 1947? Have free trade agreements been successful for India? What are the issues with free trade agreements? What kind of negotiations can we expect in future? That is, we are going to have a comprehensive analysis of free trade agreement as a policy for India. Let's delve into our video. As I told you, the title is India's Free Trade Agreements, a comprehensive analysis. The first thing we need to understand is what are free trade agreements. By the name itself, one can decipher free trade agreement. It is an arrangement where two or more countries commit to opening up their markets to one another by lowering tariffs, quotas, and other trade barriers, making it easier for goods and services to move between them. The concept of free trade agreement is the opposite of protectionism or economic isolationism. In economic realm, we understand FTA as the first or rather the second step. The first step would be a PTA, a preferential trade agreement. From a PTA, we move towards a free trade agreement, then towards a comprehensive economic agreement, eventually leading up to customs union, customs market, and eventually economic union. The next question is, are free trade agreements a policy right from our independence? The answer would be no. There has been a strategic evolution of our trade policy. You all know that from 1947 till 1991, India had inward-looking policy. We were not very much integrated with the rest of the world. The forces of globalization had not taken roots till 1990s in India. We can say that we slowly started to liberalize our economy in 1980s, and eventually in 1991 we had the LPG reforms. Before 1991, Indian policy was inward looking, where the private sector itself was controlled through licensing and the quota system. But since 1991, the forces of globalization have been on rise. And since then, we have seen India's approach of going for free trade agreements, especially in the 21st century. Why? Because today we go for economic liberalization. There is complex interdependence which has evolved among different countries. Now, this is the first thing that you need to understand. Free trade agreements have been a phenomena post 1991. Sir, is there any other trend in India's free trade agreements? Let's delve a little deeper into that. Today, what is the portfolio of India's free trade agreement? As of 2025, India has signed 13 active free trade agreements and 6 preferential trade agreements with various countries or regions. Some of the major free trade agreements have been India-Sri Lanka FTA signed in 2000, India-Singapore CESA, that is Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, signed in 2005. A major FTA or a major CESA came in 2010, India-ASEAN Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. After that, we also signed such agreements with South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Mauritius. In recent times, we have signed a CEPA with UAE and an economic cooperation agreement with Australia as well in 2022. I hope from this table you get an observation. If you look at the trend in India's free trade agreement, right from the year 2000 till I would say around 2020, our focus had been mostly neighborhood or extended neighborhood, and the Look East policy, later on transformed into Act East policy, played a very big role in pushing these free trade agreements. But in recent times, I would say in the last 4 to 5 years, there has been a new trend in India's free trade agreement Today, we are looking for more FTAs or economic cooperation agreements with developed economies. We are not just limited to neighborhood or excellent neighborhood or looking only towards the east. Today, we are going for more and more free trade agreements with developed economies. The classic example being the recent breakthroughs that we have achieved. The India-UK Free Trade Agreement was signed in July 2025. This has been a landmark agreement. A few months back, we have also signed a trade and economic partnership agreement with European Free Trade Association. It will become operational from October 2025. This has also been a historic milestone where the commitment is of $100 billion investment over the next 15 years with European Free Trade Association, which comprises of Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. Now, question comes, sir, what are the key trends in India's FTA? One of the key trends has already been discussed, that there is a strategic shift towards developed economies. Unlike the earlier period or a few decades back, we were focusing predominantly on neighborhood and extended neighborhood. But now we are pursuing comprehensive free trade agreements or comprehensive trade deals with advanced economies. I gave you example, Australia, EU, UK, or EU free trade area. Apart from that, India's free trade agreement, right from the beginning, I would say right from 21st century, they have been a little defensive. The reason behind this is that we want to protect our domestic industry. Now, if you look at the three sectors, we have primary sector, agriculture, secondary manufacturing, and tertiary, that is services. If you look at agricultural and manufacturing sectors, India goes for more protection. Even in our FTAs, whatever FTA you want to talk about, we see more and more agricultural protection. Dairy, wheat, rice, and other staple products, they remain protected across all FTA negotiations. When you talk about manufacturing, we always talk about safeguarding manufacturing in India. We do not want our domestic industry to be suddenly open to competition with foreign products or foreign market, which would create a problem, a competitive problem for us. So what we have gone for in the free trade agreements is safeguards for our manufacturing. Even in the free trade agreement or any sort of comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, tariff reduction would be gradual. There would be some sort of schedule or a quota system to protect our domestic industry. Higher amount of opening or higher market access has been provided in the tertiary sector, especially services. There has been focus on opening up services trade, particularly information technology, financial services, and we want professional mobility. We want more visa liberalization for Indians to go and work abroad. That has been a trend in almost all the free trade agreements, which is very true for the FTAs with advanced economies as well. Apart from that, there are certain key strategic priorities in our FTA negotiations. In recent times, free trade agreement has become a very important tool, or rather a policy for India. Nomenclature might be different. Somewhere we call it as free trade agreement, somewhere we call it CESA, somewhere we call it SEPA. The terminology might be different, but ultimately there are two important purposes of this. First one is, of course, economic integration, but there is a second reason as well. We go for strategic partnership with these countries. We are politically aligned with these countries. There has been a shift towards UK, EU, and possibly in future an agreement, a bilateral trade agreement with United States of America as well. Apart from this, another priority for us in any negotiation has been export enhancement for India. You do know that we have competitive advantage in certain sectors, especially in information technology, pharmaceutical, capital goods, engineering goods, and textile sector. So these areas are core areas of our negotiation where we want to enhance or improve our exports to the other countries. Apart from that, a new area of discussion or a new trend in the last decade or so has been investment integration. If you look at the recent FTAs, they are more and more focused on not just trade, they are focused on services, but they are also focused on investment, they are focused on technology transfer, they are focused on supply chain integration. Apart from that, another priority is global competitiveness. while we push for free trade agreement, we also push for integration with global value chain. We have seen the problem of over dependence on China in 2020. When the COVID-19 came, it disrupted the global supply chain because there was too much of reliance on China. So what we want to do is we want to diversify, and that is why we want to create more resilient and robust global supply chains, global value chains. That is what we are looking for in the FTA as well. Another feature in our FTA negotiations has been regulatory sovereignty. We want to maintain control over the labor standards. We want to maintain control over the safety standards. Of course, we want to align with the international norms, but we would like certain exemptions with respect to, say, environmental standards, labor standards, and other standards. These are some of the common parameters or common priorities that we have gone for in almost all of our free trade agreements. Now, the question that beckons in front of us is, sir, have FTAs been successful? If we go for economic analysis of these free trade agreements, especially the recent ones, there has been a very positive outcome. The bilateral trade with specific country or a specific region has been continuously on rise. For instance, India-UAE trade exports to UAE, India's trade exports increased from $31.6 billion to $36.6 billion in FY25. India-Australia trade deal, which was finalized in 2022, it also led to rise in exports from India. The exports rose from 6.95 billion to 8.58 billion this fiscal. It is projected that India-UK free trade agreement, once it kicks in, it is going to boost our bilateral trade by 25 billion pounds annually. So, economic impact is already a given. There are positive signs for sure. That is why we sign FTA. Why do we go for free trade agreements? Because we want benefit for both the countries. Bilateral trade has to increase. Our exports would increase. Yes, we are going to import from the other country as well. That means the bilateral relations, especially robust bilateral trade relations, is one of the intention, and which we can see in different FTAs. But have there been certain challenges? What are the issues with India's FTAs? There has been a strategic shift. You do know that we have gone for free trade agreements, but many a times free trade agreements can lead to trade deficits. India maintains trade deficits with 5 FTA partners. One of the largest trade deficit comes from the ASEAN region. In fact, ASEAN is a template for us to understand the challenges that come from a free trade agreement. When you look at India-ASEAN agreement, the trade deficit has widened continuously. Initially in 2010, the trade deficit was $8 billion. That means more number of imports come into India from the ASEAN region. The exports are less. That is trade deficit. $8 billion. But today it is $45 billion. So trade deficit has been on rise. This is unsustainable in the long run. Apart from that, there has been asymmetric liberalization, especially with ASEAN. India opened up 74% of tariff lines, while the ASEAN members offered significantly less tariff reductions. There has been very low utilization of free trade agreement as well. I can give you an example of South Asian free trade agreement as well. The utilization rate of India-ASEAN FTA has been only 25%, whereas when you look at the other regions, especially where developed countries are involved, 70 to 80% utilization of these FTAs occur, but with ASEAN only 25% utilization. There is another challenge with ASEAN FTA, that is Chinese product being routed into India. There have been concerns that Chinese product might be entering India through ASEAN routes. The challenges that I discussed with ASEAN, they are more or less similar to other FTAs as well. I am not telling that all the FTAs have led to trade deficit, but majority of them with bigger players have led to trade deficits. Apart from that, there are certain other challenges like simplification of procedures, which is needed in India. Institutional strengthening is also one of the areas where we can work, we can focus, so that we can benefit fully from these free trade agreements. Now that we have understood the challenges, there can be certain recommendations for India going forward into the FTA negotiations, what India needs to do to enhance our negotiation. First of all, whenever we are negotiating, we need to go for technical expertise. We need to build specialized knowledge in the newer areas or newer field which will be part of FTA negotiations, like artificial intelligence, digital trade, environmental standards, investment protection, dispute resolution. Technical expertise during negotiation is a must. Apart from that, industry integration is needed. Before finalizing any FTA, there have to be systematic consultation with the industry expert, with the industry leaders, with the exporters and the importers in our domestic sphere. Once the FTA kicks in, we need to build robust monitoring system. There has to be real-time assessment of FTA utilization and impact. If the FTA is not being utilized, steps have to be taken to improve utilization. Apart from that, in FTA, we need to go for strategic focus areas going forward, especially digital trade. We all talk about digital India. We need to address data localization issues. E-commerce industry or e-commerce sector has been growing continuously. Digital services, everybody is looking for a share from India's digital services, and these might be up for discussion in future negotiation. Apart from that, climate integration is another point. Many of the developed economies, they are looking for carbon tax. They are looking to impose carbon tax. They have stringent environmental standards. Now, you all know negotiations are going on at UNFCCC as well. Developed countries are the biggest emitters or historical emitters. Now they want to reduce, but India has its own share of development. So climate negotiations or climate integration will become a part of FTA negotiations going into future. We need to be ready for that. Apart from that, we also need to focus on supply chain resilience. Although this has already become a part and parcel of our FTA discussion, we all want to decouple, or I would say reduce the reliance from China. So reduce reliance on a single country for a specific supply chain. We need to diversify it. So these are the things that we need to work on going forward into future negotiations. And there are going to be more and more negotiations. We're already having a discussion with European Union. India-EU free trade agreement is in advanced stages, with both sides committed to concluding the negotiations by the end of this year. There is also a talk of bilateral trade agreement with the United States of America. There are other active negotiations going on with New Zealand, Chile, Oman, and Gulf Cooperation Council. So we'll be keeping an eye on these as well. But I hope that you have gotten the idea about India's FTA and how things have evolved. Initially, our focus was predominantly on the neighborhood and the external neighborhood, but today we are talking more about advanced economies. So India's concept of strategic autonomy is also being redefined in the context of global trade. India's FTA strategy is maturing. It is continuously evolving. There has been a clear-cut shift towards developed economies with emphasis on more and more comprehensive agreements. We are also focusing on bringing investment into India, bringing technology into India, joint ventures between India and other developed economies. Of course, challenges are there in the existing agreements and they will be in future agreements as well. We need to resolve them as soon as possible and ensure that the FTAs are being fully utilized. And the way the negotiations have been going on recently, we have finalized the UK FTA. We have also finalized the FTA with the European Free Trade Area. And how they are going to pan out is going to be crucial for our future negotiations as well. We'll keep an eye on that. As and when there is any update, we'll have a discussion on Rahul Verse. I hope that you have gained good insight into free trade agreements of India. Let me conclude our discussion on that thought. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found this video interesting, please like and share and also subscribe to the channel Rahul Verse. Thank you again. Jai Hind.